This video focuses on making the upper cabinets for my daughter's kitchen, but I'm going to cut the pieces for all of the cabinets at the same time, including the base cabinets. That gives me some efficiencies when it comes to setting up my table saw to cut all the rabbets and dados. It's pretty standard to make the upper cabinets 12 inches deep, and that is more economical because you can get 4 12-inch pieces out of each sheet of plywood. But I'm going to make the cabinets 13 inches deep. I'm not worried about wasting any material because I'll be able to use the remaining narrower strips for shelves. The upper cabinet that goes over the fridge will be 31 inches wide by 29 inches deep, and that leaves me enough to cut the top and bottom for one of the other cabinets. With my table saw, I'll clean up the cut from the track saw and then trim the other side so that all pieces are the same width. I bought the plywood in 2 batches. Look at the flat layers of this North American plywood versus the wavy layers in this Vietnamese plywood. They're constructed quite differently. I'm cutting all of these pieces to be 12.5 inches, and then I'll add a 1/2 inch edge banding. Now I'll cut everything to length at the same time so that all of the cabinets will have the identical height. I'm making the upper cabinets a little taller than standard because I have an 8.5 foot ceiling, so I may as well use the space. With a stop block at the end of my table saw sled, I don't have to measure anything, and all of the pieces will be the same length. I'll just use my fence for the shorter tops and bottoms. Next, I will cut the rabbets along the top and bottom edges of the side pieces. I'm cutting them into the side pieces so that I won't have any exposed plywood edges that would otherwise be visible on either side of the range. I'll use a 1/2 inch piece of plywood to set my fence so that it's a 1/2 inch away from the dado blade. With the blade raised slightly higher than what it was when cutting the rabbets, I will cut a groove along the back edge of each piece to hold the back in place. All of the backs will use 1/2 inch plywood. And then I'll glue everything together. This cabinet is 27 inches wide, and it will be mounted on the wall to the right of the fridge and on the left side of the range. Over the range, there will be a shorter cabinet above the microwave that's 30 inches wide, and then to the right of that will be a 36-inch wide cabinet. I like to use these 90-degree corners to help ensure everything is square. While the glue is drying, I'll cut some edge banding from poplar. I sanded them down to the right size and then cut them to thinner strips on my bandsaw. And then I sanded them again so that everything would fit onto the plywood edges and require minimal sanding by hand. I glued on the edge banding and then headed to the house to get some measurements. It's hard to measure accurately with a tape measure because it would have to bend at one end, so I'm using a couple of sticks that I clamped together. And then to confirm the measurement, I'll use this laser. Both methods give me the same result, differing no more than 1/16 of an inch, which gave me confidence. I also have to make a panel in the bathroom that separates the washer-dryer from the toilet. Next, I'll sand off the edge banding to make it flush with the plywood. This is the cabinet that goes over the fridge. For the panels, I have a couple of 10-foot sheets of plywood that will go all the way to the ceiling. I cut both pieces to be about 30 inches wide to conceal the appliances. And then I trimmed them to length, cutting them just a tiny bit shorter than what I had measured so that I can get them installed without having to cut again on site. Next, I drilled holes for the shelf pins into each cabinet using this Milescraft jig. It helps to ensure that all of the holes are drilled in the right location and with the right spacing. I drill each hole twice to help remove the wood shavings. Next, I'll cut some strips of wood from some scrap half-inch plywood. These will be glued onto the backs of the cabinets and used to hang the cabinets on the wall. It's important that I cut all of these pieces at the same time so that they're all the same height. Now I'm outside getting ready to paint the cabinets, but I will glue on those strips first. For the paint, I'm using Sherwin-Williams Chem Aqua Plus. It's a waterborne lacquer which gives a great finish for cabinets. I start by spraying on a surfacer, which is like a primer. It dries really quickly and can be sanded about 20 minutes after applying it. It sands easily to a really smooth finish, and then the paint coat goes on. The paint also dries quickly, but while it's drying, I will begin cutting some poplar to make shaker-style doors. I cut all the rails and stiles to be 3 inches wide. Next, I cut everything to length. I'm going to use 1/4 inch MDF for the panels, so I will cut a 1/4 inch groove down the middle of each rail and stile. They're guaranteed to be centered because I make one cut and then flip the board around to make the second cut. Next, I will cut the tenons at the end of each rail. I learned pretty quickly that there was too much risk of breakaway. Luckily, I was able to save that piece and glue it back on. I changed my method to make the first cut vertically and then finish up the cut with the board laying horizontally, and then everything worked much better. You can see that the dado blade is set so that it barely takes off the wood at the top of the groove, so that means it's going to be a really snug fit. Next, I'll cut the panels for each door and then glue them all together. MDF works well for the panels rather than plywood because it paints really well. I don't want any wood grain showing through, which you are more likely to see with painted plywood. I'll use those 90-degree corners again to help ensure that the doors are square. And then I'll sand each door and get them ready to paint. Next, I'll use a Forstner bit to drill the holes for the concealed hinges. Before installing the hinges, I'll round over the edges with a 1/16 inch roundover bit. I'll use a square to help make sure the hinges are not crooked, and then I'll use a self-centering bit to drill the holes. Next, I'll mark the position of the bottom hinge. I put a couple of spacers to hold up the door so that it's centered vertically on the cabinet. The doors are just a tiny bit shorter than the cabinet. After the first hinge is installed, I'll attach the door and mark where the top hinge goes. That's more reliable than measuring. The hinges are adjustable to an extent, but I still need to trim the doors a tiny bit because they are a little too close together. Back at the house, I'm ready to install the cabinets. I'll screw these pieces of half-inch plywood to the studs. I'm using a laser level to position each piece at the exact height. Then it becomes really easy to install each cabinet without having to measure anything. As long as I made each cabinet the same height, all of the bottoms will align. I'll put a corner cabinet here, and I'll have a separate video for that cabinet because it's trickier to build. The only cabinet that I needed help with was the one that goes over the fridge because it's so large. Next, I will install the panel. The fridge fits with just enough space on both sides. The remaining cabinets are really easy to install by simply hanging them and then screwing them in. Now I'll paint the cabinet doors. I hang them on meat hooks so that I can spray both sides at a time. Another way to do it is to screw an eye hook into the top of the door because those holes would never be seen, but I prefer to do it this way and have no holes at all. The base cabinets are going to be made from zebrawood, so I'm going to make custom door handles from some leftover pieces of zebrawood. I'm starting with a 1/2 inch round nose bit to cut a rounded groove for the fingers to fit into. Next, I used a 1/4 inch roundover bit to round over the outside edge. After looking at the result, I felt like a 1/2 inch roundover would be nicer, so I changed the bit and did it again. Now I'll hang these with eye hooks and spray them with lacquer. Then I cut them to be just a little less than 5 inches long, using a stop block to set the length. I made this drilling jig to position the holes for the handles. I made it so that the holes are 3 inches apart, so that the handles could be changed to something different if desired, using standard off-the-shelf handles. Here's an example of a handle that could be used, but I think the ones I made are going to be a lot nicer to tie in with the base cabinets. The only screws that Lowe's had that were the right size had a slot head, which always makes it more difficult than it should be to screw in. And that's it. I think they look pretty cool. In the next video, I'll show how to make a base cabinet with grain-matched zebrawood drawer fronts.